This book, spooky as shit. Hi, my name is Adriana and today I will be talking about Still Life with Crows by Preston & Child. Still Life with Crows is the fourth installment of the Pendergast series. In this one, Pendergast finds himself in Medicine Creek, Kansas after a gruesome murder where a body is found mangled in a cornfield. So he takes himself on a bus from up to Kansas and does his little Pendergast thing in this tiny nothing town. So there's your little synopsis. Feel free to stop now if you want to go into this book mostly blind. I will be jumping into plot, characters, my thoughts, finally some spoilers, but before I do that, please consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. So as I had mentioned, this is the fourth book in the Pendergast universe and the first of the Pendergast series to take place outside the city of New York. So we will start with the setting of Medicine Creek, Kansas. It is very rural, very small, not a lot going on. Seems like kind of a one stoplight town. There is a turkey processing factory and a lot of corn. And I think the setting does a lot to add to kind of the overall spookiness of this book. There were several times I had to put this book down, especially reading before bed. I was like, nope, can't handle it. This is too scary for me. And I think the isolation of a place like this where you are just so far removed from everything, and Preston & Child do write pretty good kind of creepy horror. The only other book I remember being that scared physically reading was Thunderhead by them. And again, that's a very kind of isolated, removed, desolate kind of area. I never remember being that scared of the first three books in this series, and they all I think they all take place in New York City. So there's always people around. That's the thing about New York. It's you're never alone. There's always somebody milling about. But in a place like Medicine Creek, Kansas, yeah, you could be the only person around for miles. And that's really scary. Yeah, super spooky. So with setting kind of encapsulated in just desolate, spooky, dying town, we will move on to characters that inhabit this desolate, spooky, dying town. I think our first POV character is the sheriff, Sheriff Hazen. He has lived in this town his entire life. His family has been here for generations, always being the sheriff, which seems kind of a lot of nepotism going on in there, but I think he's a third generation sheriff of this tiny little town, and he's having to deal with these incredibly gruesome, I'm not an author. I don't have the words to describe how visceral these murder scenes are. It's horrific. And so you have this sheriff who really hasn't had to deal with much besides, drunken disorderlies in his time, having to deal with state police, and then, all of a sudden Pendergast showing up out of nowhere, deciding he's helping out, even though it is well outside his jurisdiction. And the sheriff, he wasn't my favorite character. It's a very kind of stereotypical character. If you've seen a sheriff of a small town in a movie or a book, you've seen Sheriff Hazen. He's that guy. He has a deputy, Tad, can't remember his last name, but is kind of a surrogate son to the sheriff, who's just kind of a regular guy getting some experience as deputy here in Medicine Creek, eventually wants to kind of, like I said, get his experience and move on to a bigger and better city. I think that kind of handles our police side. Obviously, the main character of this series, Pendergast, coming in. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you have read a Pendergast book before. You know who Pendergast is. He's this very enigmatic, suave FBI guy who just knows everything all the time. We don't get to really see how he gets there all the time, which is one of my main complaints about this book specifically. I don't remember seeing it as much in the last three books, but this one specifically, Pendergast be making some leaps that we don't get any kind of indication where they're coming from. And I don't love that. I like to see a character work to get there. But it's still pretty fun. We also have the introduction of a character I have become very familiar with due to my jumping into the Nora Kelly series. Let's pull out one of these bad boys. And that is Corey Swanson. In the Nora Kelly series, she is like a full-on adult FBI agent. In this introduction, she is just like a 17-year-old girl living in this shithole town. And Pendergast kind of takes her under his wing and hires her as his assistant to drive him around since he just showed up in a bus and help him in his own investigation because obviously she is very familiar with this town having grown up there. And then the final character I will touch on just because I keep hearing she's gonna be a big deal in the rest of the series is Winifred. She owns the bed and breakfast that Pendergast stays in. I don't know how she ends up being a character in the rest of the series, but when I was starting this book, I had many people tell me, pay attention to this character, you're gonna love her. And I don't love her yet, having, you know, read this book, but I guess as I continue on in the series, I will grow to love her. But she just seems like a quaint older woman who owns a bed and breakfast in a town in Kansas. So moving on from the characters that are kind of our main group we follow in this book, I will jump into the plot. Like I said, this book, very scary. Like, I am a wimp. I will admit that. I am not like a horror girly. That is not my vibe. That is not what I typically get into. I found this book to be very, very scary. But more so than scary, I found probably 300 pages of this book to just be boring. Like, so much of this book was so boring. And like, I think the authors kind of do this on purpose. Like, they introduce all of this stuff, all these characters, all these gruesome murders, all these connections, and then just kind of let it sit for a long time to either give like you a chance to figure it out or like forget what's happening so they can do a big plot twist at the end. I don't really know why they do it. That's a couple of my theories, but I got so bored in the middle there. You just have like Pendergast sleeping in the car and like Corey watching him sleep in the car while she's driving him around. I guess like the other thing that was just like peppered into the boring part of this book was this kind of B-plot about this town or the neighboring town potentially getting an experimental GMO cornfield from Kansas State University. And again, I just didn't really care. Like, I understand why they had to put like some sort of B-plot in there for spoilery reasons, but like, I just don't care about whether this dying town or the neighboring dying town gets an experimental cornfield, because like, it's not going to be the boon for your economy you think it is. And like, that's like a common thing in like small rural towns. They think anything new is just going to like make their economy thrive. It's not. It's not going to do that. But then you get to like the last 100 pages of the book and it's scary and exhilarating and thrilling and there's so much happening and you're like, oh my gosh, why can't this be the whole book? But yeah, no, it's very slow for like 75% of the book. And I think there just wasn't enough like clue gathering for me. Like, we had this kind of weird sequence where Pendergast does like this mind palace thing and gets like time traveled back in time and like sees a scene happening. And I don't know, man. I don't know if I can get into this. Like, you either need to go like full supernatural and just tell me he has superpowers and he uses superpowers, or you need to go like no superpowers, he's just a really smart guy. Like, this whole kind of like middle ground of like, is he supernatural, is he not, is not really my vibe. But the last 100 pages, with the exception of like my heart racing from terror, very much my vibe. So with that, I think I will jump into spoilers now because it's a mystery. Like, you gotta talk about the spoilers, the plot twist. So if you have not read this book, I'll check you later on the next one. But if you have, stick around because I want to talk about it. So, into spoilers. The plot twist at the end of the book makes me even more confused as to why I'm going to like Winifred as a character. Like, she abandoned her kid in caves for 50 years. Why do I like her as a character? I mean, don't spoil me for anything coming up in the series, but like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm gonna like this or not. These Pendergast books seem to verge more on like supernatural spooky stuff than they do into more kind of like realistic science stuff. But even that, like, if someone grew up in a cave for 50 years, I don't think they're becoming a super strong monster man. I think they're becoming, I don't think they're living past the age of 7. Like, I don't think this works. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this twist. I don't know how I feel about this character Job guy. I don't know. I did like the reveal at the end when Winifred is reading the nursery rhyme and we realize that like all of his attacks like weren't random. They were based on the nursery rhyme. That was pretty neat. I liked that tie-in. I think it would have been more fun had we gotten a connection between the nursery rhyme and the murders like early in the book, and then we could have like had more breadcrumbs as to this was someone with the mind of a child. I don't know. I don't know about this one. This is not my favorite. I rewatched my review of Cabinet of Curiosities and I really enjoyed that one. I don't really remember what happened in it now, but I really liked that one. This one, Still Life with Crows. I don't know. I did like the introduction of Corey. Corey is fun. I like her and her vibe. But like, those are my spoilery thoughts. So, if you have any answers to my questions that won't spoil me for the rest of the series, please drop them down below. And thanks so much for watching and I will catch you on the next video.